do have to say something. Hey, look, this is the most fun time of the morning. All right. Y'all, it's easier today because our speaker is the same person who led the singing, our own Donnie Phillips. Now, you may know that he graduated from Faulkner University, or went to Faulkner University, went to David Lipscomb, Troy State, Master's Education, and at Auburn, he worked on a PhD. Now, some of y'all don't realize you can get a PhD from Auburn. Unfortunately, Donnie didn't. Unfortunately, Donnie didn't. He only lacked the dissertation. How's that coming? Okay, all right. 27 years in Montgomery. Director of Transportation, 400 buses, 450 people. This is your, what was, how many years in school buses? 45 years, 45 years. Please help me welcome a man who gave up a promising career as a professional wrestler to work on a lesson and speak to us today. Donnie Phillips. Could be Dr. Donnie Phillips.
You never know what Russ is going to have for you. Get back, I've got to get about 8 or 10 pages of notes back over here. Actually, got a page and a half. We did have two great Christians leave this world Friday. I don't know if you had the privilege of knowing either or both. I did. I was very fortunate. I would say both were ready to go. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. I'm not the judge, but it just looks like to me, from the information I have from the Word, they're safe. They're safe in the arms of Jesus. As Mike and I were saying, it's going to happen to all of us sooner or later if the Lord doesn't come first. And for a Christian, it's really not the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing that can happen to you is fall from grace. Well, we're supposed to have an introduction. And by way of introduction, I got two. My dad, by the way, was a lover of humor, but only if it was so corny that you just say, Dad. Now, at age 68, when I tell a joke, my sons say, Dad. So it's coming full circle, I think. I actually have a joke that my daughter told me years ago, and you may know these, they're online. Where was Moses when the lights went out? He was in the dark. That was from a 4-year-old. See how funny that was? And then, let's see, here's one for the good Bible students. How many of each animal did Moses put in the ark? Well, it was Noah. It wasn't Moses. He didn't put any of them. Judy got it. Anyway, I actually have a very serious topic to try to share with you today. A lot of it has to do with my past and experiences, but I dare say that many of the experiences are the same that some of you had. If you're under 30 or so, you won't have to know what I'm talking about. I want to talk about race relations in the churches of Christ. Really got quiet. I want to tell you a little bit about the history that I shared. Those of us guys who grew up in the South, that are up in our 60s, and girls, were not born, but learned very quickly a certain amount of racial prejudice. We may not have been taught that, but we saw it in our society. And it has changed dramatically for the better. But guys, it was evil and wrong so many years ago. You had to be in the South to really see it as a child. And our problem was in the South and in the church. We did not see segregation as a problem. No minorities, no problem. I started out, one of my early memories was living in Chester, South Carolina. That was about 1957. That's a little mill town about 50 miles north of Columbia. And all I could remember about segregation or integration there was that Saturday, us white people didn't go to town. Why? Black people went to town. We've never understood in our white culture that the majority of, I'll just say blacks, but I'm referring to all minorities, they had a lot of jobs that they couldn't get off of. And they couldn't go to town partying in those days. Might not get off at 5, stores close at 5. We never thought about that. But we, I was told, didn't go to town on Saturday. And this was, like I say, way back there. If you drove through town, it was covered with minorities. Because that was their only opportunity. Stores were closed on Sundays in those days. Then we moved into the hotbed of segregation into Tupelo, Mississippi, 1962. In our church, it was found that we had the Grand Dragon of KKK in our church. Highly thought of. And once he was out of the closet, I don't know that many people knew he was, but the newspaper had a big spread. He left and went to jail, and it was just unsettling. But that was kind of my first experience knowing that we, even in the church, and everything I say about the world or my experiences applies to the church, that we treat people differently. At least in the 60s we did. Not proud of it. I hadn't come all the way around, but I think I'm 99% all the way around. But we accumulated, I think, prejudices in the South because that's the way our society was, and we were too naive to realize that we had this huge problem. We didn't even see it as a problem. Again, no minorities, no problem. Then in 65, we moved to Montgomery, Alabama, another hotbed of segregation. And I was in high school when Sidney Lanier High School was integrated in 65. And I saw, my personal feelings were pretty much along the line of what, frankly, most people thought then, that's separate but equal is good enough. Well, let me give you my example of equal. Black kids. They had to be escorted by state troopers, 2 troopers to each child, all the way through. Met with bitterness. If the court hadn't ordered our Board of Education to integrate, we wouldn't have. But one of my worst memories, and I almost felt like Saul holding the cloaks for the stoning of Stephen. He didn't stone Stephen, did he? But he held their cloaks, and I'm not sure how guilty he was, maybe 100%, maybe none. But I remember seeing these poor black kids, 15, 16 years old. Lanier had 3 stories, and you had stairwells that went up two sets of steps with a landing between each floor. And you could see down in there. And I mean, there would be 50 kids up on the top floor spitting on these poor black kids that were just trying to get up the stairs. And I was there. I didn't do any spitting. Didn't think that was good. But I was kind of hanging around the fringes, kind of like Saul was. I don't feel too good about that. Then I went to Alabama Christian in 67. Actually, fall of 66. And there's where I probably had my first kind of more or less personal encounter. Again, I grew up in a segregated society. At Alabama Christian, we had black preacher students. You remember Richard Rose? Yeah, Randa and I went to junior college together. I know the name, I can't put a face. Elijah Anthony, you remember him? Okay. Well, it dawned on me that, hey, these guys are Christians,
They were good people. Got to talk to them personally a little bit. But a sad thing, and again, I didn't rise up in arms. One of my friends and one of his friends thought it would be a great joke to go to Richard Rose's, the black preacher student's dorm door when he was not there, and scratched 3 letters on the door very prominently, KKK. Well, what was a joke to these guys was not a joke to Richard Rose. You remember that, Randa? Did you know about that? So, I was right in the middle of it, saw it, really didn't participate, but if I knew what I know now, I'd have tried to do something anyway. So that was my introduction really to minorities in a personal way. Richard Rose was a fine, fine man. In '68, I went to Lipscomb, and there I saw the first black athletes. And I thought I was a little bit of an athlete, so we'd play ball together, and that's the way you get to know people. And I already knew here, but there were people just like me. Happened to have a different color skin, but of course most of them could play ball better than I could because I wasn't on the college team. But they just became people, and we had one of the bad things about Lipscomb, or this not bad about Lipscomb, was seeing the kids that came back from Vietnam and were going to school on the GI Bill. And we probably had 10 kids that had been close to grenades and stuff. A couple of them had half black faces, half whites, where the powder burn had gotten them. Several of them were blind from explosions and tapped their way around campus. And about half of them were white and about half of them were black. Now by then, I'm ready to step into the professional world almost. I'm not a kid, not a little kid. There again, the influence and what I could see from a personal standpoint told me what I had been led to believe was just wrong. Just flat wrong. I was not, still not, tooting the horn loud and long. I just believe that people are people, and I've told you that quote before. So Lipscomb gave me another insight into the minorities. I'd had one other that I didn't mention, and I could go on forever about this, and may. When I was a student at Alabama Christian, I always worked a construction job in the summer to make money to help with school. I think it cost a whole $330 a quarter for tuition at Alabama Christian. And I lived at home those years. But I worked a construction job, and one of the last ones I had was driving a tractor with a belly mower to mow all the school grounds. We had 52 schools even back then. And there were 3 black guys and me. And again, getting to know them. Well, you stop wherever you were finished mowing at 11 or 11:30, and you got something to eat. Well, one time we were in the middle of the minority community at one of those schools that I'd never even heard of, by the way. Didn't know it existed. And one of the guys on the tractor was young like me, and he said, "You want to come to my house and get a sandwich?" Well, I had scratched my head a little bit, but it didn't take long for my stomach to overcome my head. And I said, "Yes, I'd like to come." I said, "My wife will be there. She'll fix us a sandwich." We go over to where there's just, y'all seen the row houses that are just rentals, just all of them cookie cutter houses, 50 years old, frame, all were painted green. I said, "I don't know what I'm getting into, but I hope I can get out of it." Went in, he introduced me to his wife, sweet little girl. They were probably 20 years old. That house was cleaner than this auditorium. Spotless. Fixed a good sandwich, enjoyed my visit. After that summer, I never saw them again, but they made an influence on me. So I get out of Lipscomb. Everybody knows I graduated magna cum laude. I graduated laude how come? I was not a great student. I got better with a couple of years behind me. Randa, we didn't have to work very hard at Alabama Christian to make decent grades, but you did at Lipscomb, I assure you. So I'm all set. I got my teaching degree. I'm ready to go to an all-white high school that I'm familiar with in Montgomery, either Lee or Jeff Davis. Lanier would have been fine. I'm all set to go. I'm going to make my place in the earth, and I get my letter that I'd been hired, and I was assigned to Carver High School. I was in the first wave of white teachers sent to all black schools. This is how some of this stuff worked now. We were under a court order. We had to have, because our population in the system was 60-40 white to black, we had to have 60% teachers in all the schools, 60% white teachers, 40% minorities in all 52 schools. So that was a big shakeup, and I'm going to Carver High School. Cannot believe it. That's the Carver Junior High School. It's all one building there, was. So I walk in the first day, have no idea what to expect. Kids were, by my standards, horrible. Jumping over a desk. One of them came in the room flipping his beanie saying Black Power. So I wasn't too thrilled with my first day. And then we had a football team, but we didn't have a fence around our field. And the principal decided it'd be a good idea to raise some revenue. Had this football game at the junior high on the high school practice field out there behind the school. And he made the teachers be a human ring around the field. No fences. Probably 20 feet from me to the next teacher. Well, Carver High School had a great basketball player. His name was Tommy Boswell. He was 6'9", and he played for the Boston Celtics for about, 6 or 8 years probably. And I'm out there, I'm supposed to collect a quarter from everybody because it was in the path of everybody walking home to the neighborhood. Well, here comes Tommy Boswell. I got me a good handful of quarters. I'm new on the job. I know how to handle myself. I say, it's going to be a quarter if you need to go through here. He looked at me, said, I'm going to cut me a white man. Well, I didn't get a quarter from Tommy Boswell. There wasn't much wrong with Tommy. That's just kind of the way things kind of were back then. We were new to each other. And I've told this story a lot. I really cried, and I'm not much on crying, but I cried when I found out I had to go to Carver. Incidentally, they had zoned in a big white neighborhood to go to Carver under this federal ruling. All the white people, every one of them, moved in one summer, relocated in another part of town. So Carver High School remained 100% black. The first 6 weeks I taught about the Apollo space missions. You remember Apollo? Well, at the end of the 6 weeks, I'm given the test. Well, all my kids failed. I'm thinking, these are the stupidest kids I've ever been around. They just can't keep up. Well, here was the problem. Well, the principal got a hold of me and he said, you can't give all F's, not the first 6 weeks. You got to give the kids somewhere to move to. You still have, they'll all quit on you. So reluctantly, I changed them to D's. Thought that was so wrong. The reason I couldn't figure out, well, I found the reason why they couldn't pass the test. This was another, we got it this way. These people who have been separate from us for so many years have it their way. And we've got a few little strings like the legal system connecting us. But the hearts of the people, majority, I don't think really wanted it in 1970. Had to have it. Anyway, the reason they flunked by and large is they didn't believe we'd gone to the moon. The kids really thought that it was a welfare deal where the government was trying to hide a bunch of money and went out in the desert somewhere and shot these films, and that was it. That taught me I had to get on these kids' level. Wasn't anything wrong with what I had taught. It was right out of the textbook. But these kids were not on grade level. Unfortunately, I saw kids in the 7th grade, that's where I started, that were already lost to the system. I had a child that I know now to be dyslexic. Everything was backwards that she wrote. I said, I got that. And of course, she made 0 on every little test and quiz. Sweet little girl. She was used to failure. She'd been what they call socially promoted up to the 7th grade. And I carried some of her writings to the principal. Black gentleman who became one of my mentors, Lewis Grayson, and showed it to him, and he laughed. He thought it was funny that, it's just one you can't do anything with. Well, she dropped out of school in the 9th grade, and I never heard anything more about her, but just shows that the system did not work for everybody. It was pretty good for us, but it wasn't too good for minorities. So it was a gradual change from not necessarily, I wouldn't have called myself a staunch segregationist, but I wouldn't have called myself a strong integrationist either. I was just part of society, just kind of like everybody else. So there were some exceptions to these kids. I thought of 2 of them as I was preparing this. One was a kid named Raymond Bryson. Smart, polite, everything you'd want in a kid. If you were teaching him at Lanier or somewhere, he'd have made it. Sharp kid, ended up with honors, went to Alabama State on a full scholarship, joined the Air Force, and 2 years later was killed as a test pilot. Crashed and died. Thought about that boy a lot. Also had one of my, 2 years after the 7th grade, I then taught the 9th grade. Well, the 9th grade 2 years later, guess what? That's the same kids that were in the 7th grade 2 years ago. I was a different person. 2 years had helped these kids a lot. And I was much more accepting. The other kid I had was Byron Bragg. He played defensive tackle for the Green Bay Packers. Played at Alabama for a number of years. He was an exceptional kid. Big old thing. Polite, yes sir, no sir. All the things that you don't think you would encounter in that environment maybe. Which again is a form of prejudice if you don't think you're going to get good kids. That's where I was. So over this process of 3 years, I went from a rookie, don't know why I'm here and I don't like it, to crying when I found out I had to leave, or I did leave. Cried when I found out I had to go, cried when I found out I had to leave. The last year I was also the assistant principal, an unpaid position, but it just shows the progress I had made, and I had a good relationship with the principal, taught these 9th graders. And along in there we had this is back to the 7th grade. I got to get this in because it makes me look good. We had a varsity basketball game against the faculty members. And I was in pretty good shape. I thought I could play a little basketball. And this is back to the first year teaching. Basketball kicks in, late in the fall. And I scored 41 points. I was the hero of the school for a while. Even the 9th graders and the high school kids came down. And of course, they had a lot of, call them Ebonics, the phrases. The one I can, you the man, Mr. Phillips. And that actually furthered my acceptance a great deal. But it was also changing me from not very active to really more proactive, and more importantly, not to see a white or a black guy approaching me, but just to see a guy, just to see a lady. After that year, I became the assistant director of transportation, did that for 4 years, then became the director, did that 20 years, and they gave me 2 black assistants. One of them I had first for the longest time, went to his funeral last year. And he taught me so much. He was 15 years older. He had come up, I had never heard of Jim Crow. Y'all heard of Jim Crow? I didn't know what it was. He explained it to me. He explained me a lot about the minorities coming up in a white world, basically. And as the director, I saw a bunch of purchase orders, and I saw a lot of the things that proved it was separate but not equal. I saw purchase orders for toilet paper. One brand, one quality went to the black schools, another quality went to the white schools. Specs for school construction, the black schools were not built as well. Textbooks, they got the old textbooks from the white schools. Strat, that was his name, my assistant, told me about when they finally got a bus where he lives, about 3 miles from school. They finally got a bus his senior year, but it was a bus that was passed down and worn out by us, not me, and there's a difference. And if they broke down, they didn't get to call a wrecker. They got out and pushed. Mud, rain, whatever. They pushed it and could get it going again. Those things were wrong. And thank God they're not really in place today in our society, except from maybe some still hot pockets like that. But he shared with me what it was like to be black, how you felt going down the road with the police car behind you, knowing that he was going to pull you over and knowing that you didn't do anything wrong. Being intimidated by the white society. You ever think how difficult it was for minorities to travel in the 50s and 60s and even early 70s? This is what the principal shared with me. Where do you go to a motel in the South? We don't think anything of it. We drive up to Holiday Inn, give me a room. Glad to. Well, minorities couldn't do that. Where are you going to eat? Couldn't be served in the restrooms. Go through the back door maybe somewhere. But it was very difficult for minorities to travel at that time. I told you about the black assistant. He had a number of just down-home, folksy sayings. And the one that impressed me the most probably, he had a million of them. They were all good. But I told you this when I gave you a little synopsis a couple of weeks ago. He said, Don, when I was young, I wanted to appear older, so I wanted to be Don. Now that I want to be younger, I'm Donnie. The saying that I like the most, he said, Don, folks is folks. Meaning, whoever and whatever, wherever, people are people. Not black, white, rich, poor, foreign, native-born, immigrant, whatever. Folks is folks. The other one that I thought about is we were talking about spanking your kids. This was the beginning of the age where, maybe we're not supposed to whip on them so much. It's saying, well, Don, I tell you, a whipping's good for a chicken. So whatever it was, a whipping fix it, or would help. I kind of subscribe to that philosophy, by the way. My kids are fortunate to be grown. They do both say, I'm going to whip my children. They are going to whip their children. I don't mean beat them up. I mean spank them on the bottom. So out of the society that I was dealing with, an advantage of this particular job is it taught me how to deal with and love and dislike certain kinds of people. Folks is folks. But here's my philosophy. If you're sorry, I don't care what else you are. I don't want to be around you. I don't want to live by you. I don't want to go to church with you. But I know a lot of sorry white folks and some sorry black folks, and I know some wonderful minority people. And I don't think that's wrong to be prejudiced against people who are against God's Word. And I think it is wrong to be prejudiced against anybody who is in God's Word, in God's kingdom. So, no idea how we're doing on time. What we got to 11:35? Anybody know? Jenny, you going to tell me when the first bell rings? Thank you. So, with all this going around us, so what's going on in our churches? You know, we got our dear sister Pat over here. Where's all your sisters? I'll get down to Homewood, but I won't tell you again where I've been. Again, we were just no minorities equals no problems. We were not aware that segregation was a problem all in itself. And it took the courts to change that, and we didn't like that. I was there, and I was in high school when the Selma to Montgomery march took place. And they took all kinds of precautions to keep us safe. So stupid. So stupid. In Chester, the little town I told you about where I started, at least recollection, so segregation. My dad started that church. There was no church in the county. And to know that it's still surviving, that's good. When we were in Tupelo, Mississippi, I really don't know for sure, but if there are any minority in that Shandon Church of Christ, it would be a tiny number. Tiny number. Montgomery, I got to tell you a story. I may have told you this before. Remember when all churches had a bus ministry? Well, I was a bus driver. I went and picked up the kids. We went to Riverside Heights in Montgomery, and there was an area of it, and everybody's supposed to know, we're picking up the white kids now. We ain't picking up the black kids. And we did that for a while, and it was growing, working pretty good. And I was out there one Sunday morning picking the kids up, and a little black kid stepped on the step well of the bus. Said, "Can I go to church with y'all?" What do you think I'm supposed to say? I'm supposed to say yes, aren't I? That's what I said. That part was easy. So we get to church, and he files in with the other 50 or 60 that's on the bus, and the mouths drop open, eyes bug out, and I thought everything was fine. What time am I done? 11:35? Let me shorten it up. But anyway, that was taboo. I heard phrases like, "We don't want them in here." Now, this was also at about the time where, at least in Montgomery, there were efforts by extremists to make sure the churches were integrated. They would go to different churches on Sunday and pretty much beg to be confronted and then get people arrested. Well, our church said, we're not putting up with that. We're going to get guards, put them on our front door. And they had a big meeting that Sunday afternoon. And that's where our church split. Anybody ever been part of a church split? It's ugly. It's ugly. You had my dad, the preacher, and two elders that were for being what they considered being progressive. People are people. Folks is folks. Let's pick up who gets on the bus. Let's don't try to fight this thing. It's not right. And two elders said, no, we're not having it. We want a church where we can just stay right here and have our services and be good to each other. That was their idea of the Christian mission. So we also had a retired elder who was about 90. So they had this big, we had 2-to-2 eldership. And we had this really old guy, and at the next meeting they went and picked him up, brought him to the meeting of just the elders, and physically propped his hand up to vote, no, we're not going to get into all this integration mess. That'll hurt you. As a young Christian, I was probably 23, 4, 5. Anyway, so about half the congregation left. My dad resigned, the two elders resigned, left the two people, and that church is dried up and doesn't exist anymore. The church we went to was called Lakewood. You probably remember that. No. And it was a wonderful experience. So what's going on at Homewood? Do we have a problem? We don't have a problem, people. Praise God. Praise God. The people here, I believe, without exceptions, see folks as folks. And if they're interested in God's Word, whatever they are, what color, what nationality, what socioeconomic class, they're welcome to be here. I deliberately didn't repeat Brett's wonderful lesson of about 3 weeks ago on this same topic. He gave you the biblical side. I'm giving you kind of the practical side and where the rubber meets the road. But Homewood is seeking to diversify, to not have, our human nature is we want to be around folks like us. Well, in the kingdom, that can't be. That cannot be. That is not God's will. So, on the encouraging side, after beating you up on racial prejudice in the church, I'm just glad I'm at Homewood. I hope you are too. We still have a ways to go. I don't know how far you need to go to diversify your church. We've made great progress, and as far as I'm concerned, if you open the doors to everybody, encourage everybody to come, who comes, and you're always looking for more warriors in the kingdom of Christ, which doesn't have any color in it. Thank you.